Now, before I get into talking about any of the action on court, I have to address the elephant, or shall I say monkey, in the room. Now, of course, that is just a little joke. I'm not trying to belittle the situation that I am just about to talk about, because the situation isn't a joke. There is something that was arisen this past week in regards to the India Open, and that was namely the conditions of the venue and the host city, New Delhi. Now, what kickstarted all of this, if you're unaware, were two things, and they are the basis for everything that followed and continues to go on even to this day. Every time I open up Instagram or Google, there's something, or Facebook, there's something about the India Open, whether it's from the side of the players that the conditions weren't good enough, people criticizing it, or people defending it. Both the two things that kickstarted all this, or kind of got it started, did come from two Danish players, namely Mia Blichfeld, a women's singles player, and Anders Antonsen, a men's singles player. For Mia Blichfeld, let's start with her. Last year, she gave an interview where she heavily criticized the conditions of the training venue. I think she criticized the main arena as well. I can't remember if she criticized that, but she definitely, I remember, criticizing basically how unclean, unhygienic everything was in the training hall. It was dirty, it was dusty, just nothing that was conducive with what can give in peak elite performance, that kind of thing. And this year, she kind of said it again. She reiterated it, saying that she'd given those points to the BWF last year and nothing has happened, even though I think the stadium has changed from last year, but obviously the host city hasn't. She said there were things that were dirty, there was bird crap on the courts, and she felt in general the conditions were not good enough for an event this high. That's quite an important distinction to make. Now, I can remember at the time last year when she made those comments, she got a lot of backlash, with many saying that she was using it as an excuse for her losing, etc., etc. Now, this year I did see similar comments, I must admit, but there was also, I think, generally plenty more support for her as well. Now, this is probably because other players also said some same things throughout the week, and more as the week would progress, namely Michelle Lee. I saw her put some things up, and Lo Yu was rather outspoken about it, with him saying, in regards to, this is not necessarily the dirty conditions on court, but the general pollution, which is the second point. He said, everyone's stamina has dropped like 2 levels. I breathe less. He also said, Lo did go on to say that he felt New Delhi wasn't a place to host a badminton tournament. Now, Lo's thoughts on that kind of echo the other player that I said kickstarted all this, Anders Antonsen. Now, Anders didn't play in the India Open. He opted to withdraw and take a $5,000 fine for the 3rd year in a row. Now, the reason he got fined was because he's a committed player. I can't remember, I think it's top 10, top 12 in the world. In the singles events, I think it's top 8 for doubles. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's correct. It doesn't really matter. Anna's is one of them. You have to play, if you're one of those players, you have to play all the 4 Super 1000s and all 6 Super 750s. Obviously, the India Open being a Super 750. But for the 3rd year in a row, Anna's withdrew. And the reason he gave was that the pollution in New Delhi was far too high. It was extremely unhealthy. And he also, like Lo Yu, expressed the thinking that I can't remember if he used the word India or if he used the word New Delhi. He did put it on an Instagram story, but he said that it shouldn't be a host for a major badminton event, just because of such a huge health risk for himself and for other players. And I'll be honest, as his reasoning for that, I have no doubt that he has other reasons. I think the scheduling, first week was in Malaysia, then you go over to India, and then you come back to Jakarta, Indonesia. I know that Anas loves playing in the Jakarta. He's called the Astora boy for a reason. And so the fact that Malaysia and Indonesia are neighbours makes sense that maybe he didn't want to do the travel. We're looking at a good, I think it's 6.5-hour flight. There's the time difference, the temperature drop as well. That was another issue that some players and some coaches I saw in the earlier rounds I think I saw Thomas Staungard wearing a hat and gloves in the arena. It was very cold in there, I think 6 degrees, which I think is actually below what's allowed, or what the BDF say is the minimum temperature inside an arena or inside a training venue. So that is another kind of issue, but it's kind of not on the main one that has been the main talking points. I think the venue did get a little warmer as the week went on. But back to what I was saying, in terms of the pollution for ANAs being the main reason, I get it, because the AQI, the Air Quality Index in New Delhi, was around the 300s, the high 300s to low mid 400s, which is extremely high. According to many experts, I did have a little look, is the equivalent of smoking anywhere from 16 to 25 cigarettes a day. That's obviously if you're outside. Inside the venue, it'll be slightly different, but still players have to travel to and from. They're still going to be in those conditions. It's not exactly conducive of a healthy environment, and it is extremely high. I think I looked today, I think in like London, it's like 50 or 60 for some sort of comparison. I think in Jakarta, it's maybe a little higher. So yeah, we're looking at 3 to 4 times, I think, what most other places are like. So it is very high. So I understand the concern that Anders Antonsen had for his health. I do believe he also suffers from asthma, which isn't obviously, it's going to exacerbate that condition. So those are the main two. So the unhygienic conditions of the playing area and the training area, mainly the training area, I think, and the facilities around the arena, and then obviously the pollution in New Delhi in January. Now, what added to all of this that's kind of created all this kind of spark online is there were some defenders of the conditions, or what's been going on in New Delhi, namely Shrikant Kadambi, an Indian men's singles player, and also maybe more importantly, the Badminton Association of India, BAI Secretary General, Sanjay Mishra. He also, I'll be honest, didn't like the criticism that came his way, or to the organisers' way. Now, Shrikant said he thought the conditions were fine, and then cited an example from the Denmark Open 10 years ago, where due to a blackout, play was suspended by an hour. And then he also dropped in that he'd speaking to HS Pranoy, another Indian men's singles player, who said that at a tournament that he had to play one of his matches across 2 days because of issues. And I think that is in relation to last year's Malaysia Open, where there was a leaky roof that put play back so far that Pranoy, and I can't remember who he was playing, but they got through like one game of their match and they had to start it again. They basically, not start it again, they had to continue the match the following day. So yeah, not a good situation. Now, as for Sanjay Mishra, he was a little more scathing, saying, among other things, "There is no place for politics in sport. It is wrong to support those who criticize our nation from abroad." Now, for me, let's start with Shrikant. He did also say in that interview that he hadn't heard exactly what, and in his already called it a Danish player, what Mia, that's who he was referring to, had said. And also, he was asked about the conditions in the arena, not in general. So I can't hold too much against him. He did say that things do happen at events. And yeah, we've seen plenty of bad things happen. Worse than there was 2 major instances of birds pooing onto the court. Not good at all. One happened in Pranoy versus Lo Ken Yu, and another happened in the women's doubles semi-final, which got more attention because Sanjay had said that there would be no more issues with that, and then that happened. Not exactly a good look, but things do happen. Who can remember in Vietnam when the roof fell down? Admittedly, that's a super, I think it was a super 100, so it's not quite of the level. This is a super 750. It should be held to even stricter standards, but the Malaysia Open, that's a super 1000 last year, and that was a leaky roof. There was some oversight. I remember reading the news articles around the time, I think some oversight with all the building regulations. So yeah, things do happen. I completely get what Shrikant was saying in that regard. But I think, obviously major things can happen. It's how when those things happen, how does the organisation respond to it? And in this case, the response wasn't like, yes, we need to do more of this or whatever. It was a bit defensive, in my opinion. And also, a lot of the issues that have been levelled against the tournament, I'll get into a little bit more in a bit, were avoidable. So it's like keeping things hygienic, cleaning the training hall was too dusty and dirty. Those things are pretty easy fixes, but Shrikant is right. These things can happen, but he was kind of commenting on, I think, wasn't talking about the major issues, which I think Sanjay Mishra was talking about. Also, I'm not quite sure when it comes to that Shrikant interview, whether the interview was done before or after the incident involving the bird poo landing on the playing courts in the match between Lokinu and Pranoy. I can't remember. I don't know whether that one was done before or after. Obviously, if it was after, I'm not so sure whether Shrikant's comments hold up. Obviously, if it was before then in general, I've mentioned that the hall was cold. And there was a kind of a haze in the arena. I'm not sure if that was pollution or whatever. It could be. But like I said, I think the main issue raised by the players was the pollution outside and the general cleanliness of the practice area and other facilities. And this is where I simply can't personally understand Sanjay Mishra's comments about how if you aren't here, you can't comment. And I think he was referring mainly to Anders Antonsson's reason to withdraw. Now, this would make sense to me if Anders had been talking about a subjective factor, like hospitality or organisation, something that you can't truly comment if you're not there. But he wasn't. He was talking about an objective measure, the AQI index, which indicated how unhealthy it was. It would be like me saying, you can't say that smoking is bad for you if you have never smoked. It doesn't quite make sense to me. Now, also, I don't think any of the players are trying to be political. They're simply pointing out some rather obvious issues. Even the BWF laid out a statement saying that general cleanliness and hygiene plus animal control require attention. Now, I think the reason why this is blown up even more on top of this is that New Delhi is set to be the host for this year's World Championship. So many have wondered whether they should be the host or should it be moved to another country. Now, for me, it will be left to be seen if they make things a little cleaner and more sanitary. Keeping the birds and the wildlife out will be important. And on the surface, that seems like it should be a rather easy fix. And for me, they're the main issues. The bird poo, if you keep the birds out, I don't know whether there's a hole in the roof somewhere or gaps up there that the birds are getting in, or someone's leaving the door open. I'd hope that after this tournament, they look at those, BAI really take a look at they speak with the runners of the venue and try to find out solutions to how they can completely improve on that, or get, not allow any animals in, or whatever it may be. But I think the cleanliness, the hygiene factor on the surface, that sounds like it should be rather simple. Keep the practice hall a little cleaner, etc., etc. Whatever, the facilities can be a little bit improved. As for the pollution, and I think this one's a main one, because obviously with Anna's comments, what it must be said is that in the summer, the AQI in New Delhi, the air quality index, does dramatically drop to around 60 to 120. So I think it's relatively, at that time, still a little high, but it's similar to most other countries. So you can't really, I don't think you could complain about the pollution in New Delhi when it comes to summertime in August, when the World Championships will be held. So I think in that regard, so for Anders Antonsson and his worries about the air quality in India, I think in the summer it should be a little better. And this leads nicely into how I want to wrap this up, because I have always been, since the World Tour over the last few years, have been a little bit confused by the scheduling by the BWF with these tournaments held in January, because you go from Malaysia to India, then back to Indonesia. It's never really been something that I've quite understood. It's a lot of travel. There's a lot of, because the tournament's held in New Delhi, the temperature drop, the conditions are quite extreme, going from Malaysia, which is hot and warm year round, to India, which is North India, that is, which is cold in January, and then back to Indonesia. Now, it must be said, in the Super Series era, you did go from the Malaysia Open to Korea, which was even more extreme of a temperature drop. But then when you add all the other factors in, but then I think back then you went from Malaysia to Korea, and then there wasn't another tournament after. I think it's then going back to Indonesia, which is definitely something that I've always kind of been a bit confused as to why the BWF have done it that way. I'm not privy to all the information behind that decision-making process. You know, the travel, the different temperatures, which again I've mentioned was another issue raised by players and also a number of coaches. Now, I do think this scheduling should be reconsidered, but even more than that, if the BWF want to hold a tournament in India in January, I do believe they have to locate it somewhere else, possibly in the south, where the pollution and the conditions are much better for everyone. Now, when this all kicked off last year with Mia's comments, and again this year, I had a number of people from India, and I've seen comments online on Facebook and stuff saying that why don't they hold the India Open in the south when the pollution is much safer, or it's much lower than the north of the country, where, you know, being winter, the haze and the fog and the temperatures keep all the pollution down rather than having it rise up. So if that isn't possible, if they can't hold it in the south, which I'm confused they can't, because, you know, you've got quite big areas, quite big badminton areas down there, then I think the only other possibility is that the India Open itself must be moved to the summer months, which, like I said, in New Delhi in the summer, the AQI is a much better. As for the handling of the criticism, I'm aiming this more at the BAI Secretary General, because obviously he's the head of it, he's the one giving the interviews. It does confuse me. Now, I know it isn't nice to get criticism, but to deflect it in the way that I heard, pretty crazy to me. I don't think the players, you know, one thing I really want to say here is none of the players, as far as I'm aware, criticised the hospitality or the running of the event or how the organisers were or the people involved. In fact, I think it's been quite the opposite. I think a number of them have said that all the people that are involved with running the tournament are doing the absolute best they can. The tournament organisation itself, you know, how the players are given when they're on court, you know, all this kind of stuff, all the little things that go on behind the scenes, it's all good. The main issue has just been the cleanliness, the hygiene, the safety of the players. It's been nothing to do with how the tournament is run. So I don't quite get, you know, everyone at the event is working to do their best. The players are simply asked that their health and well-being is better looked after, which I think is incredibly reasonable. I don't think any player that I've said has said anything untoward or out of line. In fact, I think it's come from the other way. Now, for me, there were some things about how the event looked on TV that I didn't like. The lighting with the spotlights didn't come across too well. When it was on the BWF stream, I have seen there's a number of channels that have put like fan camera stuff, you know, like they filmed it from there, and the lighting looks a lot better there. So I'm not sure whether in person it just didn't come across too well on TV. There were some moments where the lights cut out or the spotlight was moving in the women's doubles finals. So but those are little teething issues. Players aren't going to hold that against. That stuff happens. You know, we've seen that in other events as well, music coming on at the wrong time, etc., etc. And there was definitely a little haze in the hall, especially in the early rounds, but I've seen that at other big events, just in big arenas, that can happen. If that is to do with pollution, again, that will be rectified in the summer where the AQI is better, or like I said, at the India Open next year, if they hold it somewhere where the pollution isn't strong. And the last thing is the sound the floorboards made. You know, it was quite loud. I think they put down obviously some wood to make it, sprung wooden to make it better for the players. It just, the sound of it was a little bit amateur. Maybe it's actually good for the players, I don't know. You know, maybe their knees and stuff, because you don't want to play just on a mat on top of concrete. You need to have that extra protective layer. As to the main question about all of this is, should India host big events? I think they should still be allowed. Of course, they've held some really lovely big events in the past. The Thomas Newber Cup in 2014, the World Juniors last year was held in India, and as far as I'm concerned, it looked really nice there and was well run. I don't remember there being any issues or hearing news reports about it being bad then. You know, so, but there were some avoidable things. Like I've said, move the venue for the India Open in January, from January to later in the year if you want to hold it in New Delhi, or hold it in somewhere, you know, in South India, if you can't do that, and it has to be in January so that the conditions for the players are better. And like the BWF said, improve the cleanliness and keep the animals out as best as possible. So in terms of the World Championships later this year, like I said, the pollution should be better. It should be okay, good enough. As for the hygiene and cleanliness, we'll have to see. I hope that BAI take on board the criticism that has come their way. I don't think anyone's going to turn up to the World Championship expected it to be like the most perfect conditions ever, the best possible. But certainly there needs to be an improvement on it. Some of the images, we saw the bird poo instances on court. That's a definite that should definitely be rectified. But I think I saw a video that Logan, you had posted from the practice hall, and one court was completely covered, like multiple. That really, that cannot go on. That's just, that for me is a big no-no. So I don't want to, and no pun intended, shit all over this event, the India Open, especially as the badminton on display was great, and I also can't ascertain the conditions that much as I wasn't there, but there seems, to me, some very simple solutions to all the issues raised by the players, the opinions of which should be taken seriously, not pawned off as them being difficult or political. Now.